Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi, looking at the essentials or the basics of Raj Yoga. And today we have part 2 of the topic spiritual commitment. And as always, let's begin with a reflection. At times like these, when the world seems to be going through changes, there are two forces that can be acting on the soul. Both are quite positive. One is the feeling of pushing, and the other is the feeling of pulling. Something pulling the soul, and also something pushing the soul. What is pushing the soul is changes happening around us that are inviting us to look at a different way, to move from where we are, to let go, embrace something new. Some think of it as crises, but it's actually gentle nudging of the soul into a new way of operating, that the old is no longer working. And what's pulling us from the front is actually the awakening of our higher potential, that our better self is pulling us forward. So the old pushing as it falls apart, pushing from behind, and the new, the higher, the best of ourselves pulling from in front. They're working together. And I use these times of reflection to see if I am dancing with these two forces or resisting. Am I taking the signals from around me that some change is required? And am I listening to the capacities and potential within me? So I trust I can go through that change. Om Shanti.
Good evening and welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials. It's a thought-provoking reflection. I was going to start with a question, but perhaps maybe some things that came up from the reflection would actually lead to the question that came to mind. But for those of you who haven't had a chance to see last week's session, it'll probably be really helpful in terms of our continuation this evening. I was going to bring up the aspect of love, but it does seem like perhaps maybe to before we go into that, this aspect of the pushing from the old and the pulling of this sense of self. What is the sign that I'm dancing with these two different forces versus resisting them?
Mm-hmm. I think if we are resisting, things get very uncomfortable. Um, so the number one thing that we sort of suffer from is kind of hanging on to something when it's way past its usefulness, if you will. So things become uncomfortable. I feel crises as something very challenging. Um, a lot of critical thinking in the mind, a lot of irritation. So yeah, it becomes very uncomfortable in the soul if I am resisting. But if I'm able to dance or move, there's a feeling of letting go. And actually, I think there's a bit of a relief, in the sense that I'm not trying to hold together. Hanging on takes a tremendous amount of energy from the soul. I mean, even now, if you're sitting here and just try curling your fist up into a tight ball and hold it there for a while, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to attach. But, we're just so, if you will, afraid or not sure what will happen if we let go. But I think there comes a point to dance is to kind of surrender, and it's a bit of a relief. Yeah. So I think that there's an openness when we start to surrender, and it feels like a relief.
When you were using the word letting go, one of the things that we cover in the Raj Yoga course is about the powers of the soul. And we certainly have stopped actually talking about them, each separate one before they kind of become sort of dissected. But letting go is one of those powers,
Mm-hmm.
but it requires one to have power to let go.
Mm-hmm.
So what's sort of in a quandary there?
I think that something happens in the soul, different souls at different times, when rather than the term letting go may be open to something different. I think that happens at different times for different souls. It's very interesting, being with souls who are, for example, it was quite funny. I was talking to someone. We've had many layoffs in Calgary in terms of work, lots of waves of layoffs. And then, the pandemic hit. And again, many people just weren't working or were let go. And I remember I was talking to one soul who chose to leave her work just before the pandemic. And so it was really interesting, that difference, because I remember meeting her and she was very light and easy because she had chosen. There was just a feeling inside of her before the pandemic, just this feeling of it's time to move on. It was actually early retirement. It's time to move on. And she just chose to let go on her own. And that was her own timing. And so someone else who was forced to let go, i.e., they were fired, if you will, or had a very different attitude, very resentful. They're actually they're in the same position. But in one case, there's just a feeling inside of the soul that it's time to let go. And in the other case, the soul didn't get that feeling or listen to that feeling and hung out and was forced to let go. And so I do respect that some are more ready to let go than others. And I think it's something then that they just, because it's actually a natural capacity of the soul. It's actually our natural state is to have a great facility with letting go. We actually learn to attach. So it's kind of a funny, just like we learn to think we're the body. So I don't know. It seems like something awakens in souls at different times. I don't know if you can force a soul to let go. I don't think you can. Unfortunately, some will just have to be pushed off the cliff. But for those who are open to letting go, but struggling with it, I think that's where Raj Yoga is very helpful, because it tries to provide an understanding, a body of knowledge that might help the soul to begin that journey of letting go. So understanding is very helpful in this idea of letting go if someone is open but struggling with it.
So it sounds like there's a capacity of understanding that allows. So maybe it allows, excuse me. Sounds like there needs to be sort of backing up the bus, so to speak, of what allows one to let go.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny in the Hindu mythology. There is this yantra, this tool. It's called a chakra, a discus, and in the myths, very few have the facility to handle this thing. So Krishna might be shown with it, or Vishnu. Very few are able. It's considered to be quite a difficult tool to work with. And the idea is it would cut off the heads of the demons, which of course is figurative because there's no violence in these souls' nature. But it's the symbol of being able to let go of that which is no longer serving the soul. And the chakra actually represents self-knowledge, self-understanding. So this is a very powerful tool for helping the soul to free itself from things that are causing it pain, is that self-knowledge.
Is it then that one perhaps maybe has committed to a false story of the self for quite some time, that it takes time to understand?
Yeah, we get very attached to illusions, absolutely. And even if they're no longer serving us, just this issue of attachment is what we're dealing with. And I think it's one of the most difficult issues to address. It is the antithesis or the opposite of purity, or being free. And so it requires a lot of patience and constantly watering. Commitment means I'm constantly watering a promise to the self, but more important, the reason why I'm doing this. I think it's really important to keep saying why. I have that very clear, and I know we've talked about that before, that I have to have a really clear and meaningful why, and keep revising that, because that's going to help me to be able to absorb, what's in it for me, if you will. How does this nurture or feed me spiritually, or just quality of life? If that's clear to me, then that helps me to keep being open to listening to something new that might actually make it easier to let go.
When you were sharing, you were reminding me of this. I think it was based on a true story. This character named Rudy.
Mm.
He was someone who was really, really inspired to be in the football league, but he had a relatively short stature, but a big heart. A big heart in the sense of he didn't seem to give up on what he really dreamed to do. There was a part in his storyline where he did sort of almost give up. I don't actually recall what it was that caused him to revitalize, because he looked like he like no one could stop him.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of that need to be able to keep that flame of commitment going, what have you found for yourself? Because I know you were talking about always keeping that vibrant. But you see so many storylines, kind of like the Mahabharata, the Gita. There seems to always be this aspect of having to believe in yourself and not let that last straw be drawn where, and some do actually give up.
Yeah. I think it's so important to lay a good foundation when we're talking about commitment, because commitment suggests endurance as well, that this is going to be over a period of time. And so it's really important at the foundation or the start of that to have it really clear. Like, in olden days with honor, they say you're willing to die for it. This has to be that important, that high a priority, that this is something very, very important to me. We commit very easily to things that are super important, that we feel a big attainment from. So this has to be this of course is a spiritual commitment or spiritual attainment. So I have to have it very clear in my head, the why I'm doing this. Is this important to me? And just constantly revise that, keep it meaningful, because there's the commitment, but there's a force called the resistance or opposition, and it will even try to water down or deflate the meaningful. It's something that's very meaningful to me, it will try to water it down. So I have to constantly be nurturing that flame of this is really, really important to me.
This probably then transitions to that question that was going to come up last week, but love, such a huge word. I know we had the topic of pure love the other day, but it's interesting because I'm working on these blessings, and a couple of individuals, they have to just choose their virtues, and I think I saw love 3 times, and it was just a passing thought. I wonder what everyone's experience of what that means. Regarding commitment, because I know we shared last week, it's it can be an overwhelming word because of certain perceptions we have of it. So this aspect of love.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted thing. It means different things to different people. I know in Raj Yoga, the word love is connected to other experiences such as recognition, benefit, and attainment. And I think those are pretty powerful things to clarify what we mean by this word love. So to recognize something as very, that really resonates with me, that is very connected to me, that is very meaningful to me, that's really, really important. To feel there's something beneficial. We can have love for, unfortunately, very toxic things if we perceive there's something beneficial there. So that's where the recognition, I think, is really important. As we're having this conversation, I don't know, maybe because I looked at the story earlier today, it really, and I'm not saying things need to go so extreme that you literally die, but I was just reading the story of Abraham Lincoln. I don't know, and he is very well known, of course, for the Emancipation Proclamation, and I was so struck by the story. Such to me, it's a very noble love. He really recognized what his, and the reason I'm saying is because Dharma is a very important, for me, important word to connect to love. Dharma means your religion, your duty, your calling, your wiring, if you will. And what we try to do is get our character to align with our duty. And he, of course, eventually did die for his Dharma. But, he could not wrap his head around the concept of slavery. And he was leader of the country. So he has his Dharma as the leader of the country is to unite and serve all the citizens of the country. But he has a bulk of citizens who are embracing something that in his heart he cannot believe in. So he's in a very, how can he have a loving, like, how can he move this? How can he stay committed to a vision of a completely free country, dealing with, I like the story because you've got, on one side, you've got the direction you want to go, but you've got massive resistance. And this is what happens in this side, the soul, is there's a direction I want to go, but there's also an element of massive resistance. That's what happens within us. And that's what he was dealing with for our country. He had deep love for freedom, for all citizens. And like that was his dharma. That was his understanding of what's right, his duty. So that was his love, his recognition. And because of that, in his brilliance, he saw a pathway where he could get everyone connected. And some didn't quite understand it along the way and misread him, but he was leading somewhere quite specifically, step by step, with that love. And I think that's really powerful. And then, of course, there came a point when he just completely committed to emancipation and was soon after assassinated. But, he was going to die. I don't know if he knew that he would die for what he loved, but it was so, I like the story because it was just, he would not be able to live with himself if he did not commit to this path and do everything in his power to get the entire country online. And he was a remarkable diplomat in terms of what he had to do. He had close friends who were slave owners, and how it's just a remarkable story. And I suppose perhaps easy to misunderstand. But I liked it because you felt the love, but it was a very noble love connected to Dharma. And it's been said, be willing to die for your religion or Dharma. This is the foundation of Raj Yoga. It's not saying you have to espouse, but know what your Dharma is. That's what we have deep love for. And yes, eventually I want my character or dharna to match my dharma. That's the purpose of Raj Yoga, is to bring our character in line with our dharma or religion, what we feel is the right way to live. But it's, do I feel that it is my dharma to respect every human being? Is that my dharma? Then I'm going to have to go through something, where some transformation, where I become a being who can respect. I'm willing to die. And when we say die, I mean my ego is going to die. My fear is going to die. Not I physically die, but these little oppositions inside that have very, when you look at emancipation and those who were slave owners, they had a really convincing argument. They pulled the Bible in, they pulled God in, they pulled everybody in to support why we should have slaves. There was a very strong belief that blacks were simply inferior. And it was very strong. It felt very well supported. So I've been convinced reading this stuff, So these opposition forces, ego, attachment, fear, they have very convincing arguments. So I'm going to have to be so committed to my dharma to not be deceived by these arguments. And there are moments when it looked like Abraham Lincoln was deceived. There were moments when he said, yes, I understand that blacks are inferior. Of course, his thinking changed later, but he just didn't feel it was right that you should own people. But it's quite interesting to watch how his thinking became more and more clear over time. That happens to us, but he was clear about his dharma in the beginning, and that's such an important thing to do at the beginning of one's journey. Is what is my wiring, what's my calling, what's my religion, what do I feel is important as a way of life.
When you were sharing, I was just reflecting on perhaps maybe we're at this time right now in humanity where we seem to have lost the power to be committed to what really matters inside ourselves. This aspect of dharma or duty. In certain cultures, there's still remnants of it left, but it's got a violent sort of tone to it. But prior to that, it was just obvious. You would hear those phrases, you would die by your sword, or you break a promise. But I feel that I was reflecting on how clear is that for every soul in terms of there's standards, but not for violence again, but a nobility to change back to your original sense of self.
Yeah, I think definitely the strength to honor a commitment might be less at this time, which is why it's more important once I've made a commitment to create a structure that will sustain that. And that's something I've always valued about the Brahma Kumaris, the study of Raj Yoga, is it offers a body of knowledge that helps me to recognize my religion, but it also offers tools and structures to support honoring that, because you can feel there's just constant resistance. So everything from, looking at a daily schedule, a body of knowledge, lifestyle suggestions, many things that help to support, because we do need supports until such time as we've accumulated some power inside. So recognizing that, yeah, we're trying to do this at a time when we might be a little bit compromised. So I have to, it's funny, we do these meditations twice a week, and there's always a couple of minutes at the beginning while we're waiting for souls to come online. And it's always the same. It's, if you're doing this regularly, see if you can have a space that you're in where it's the same space. You're building up a vibration in that space. Try and sit in the same space and create a little, wherever it could be 3 square feet of land, it doesn't matter. It's just that alone, creating a space where you sit and reflect. It could just be a chair. This is my reflection chair. You've now created structure for yourself. It could be that simple. But it's super important to create those structures so that you have that support.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was actually quite eye-opening in terms of, I know it sounds like it's a real, it's a real story, I suppose you can say. It's a real experience about Abraham Lincoln. And I know it was very extreme, but if you were just to peel back the layers in terms of the soul and what was going on in the soul, and for each of us to be able to have that kind of clarity, because sometimes the resistance can be quite strong inside. And for yourself, what have you found, just your experience in terms of sticking with the study, where whatever the resistance looks like, so that because you've been in this, I know you always say, well, it doesn't matter how long I've been in the study, but you have to say you've been in the study for 25 years. So to keep it vibrant, no matter what.
I think it comes back to that idea of love. I really feel that the study resonates with what is deeply meaningful to me as just what it means to be a human being, to live a life. It really offers a life of dignity. And that I don't see the point of anything else if one doesn't have that. Now that's just me, so it's deeply resonates or is meaningful. So that recognition piece again, what really resonates with me or is meaningful to me. And there is massive resistance along the way. And I can't remember how many times I've, again, saying I'm so thankful for the structure to keep me going, or as we say, protect my commitment. And yes, it's true what you've said. You can do all sorts of things and still souls aren't able to carry on, and to respect that that's okay. That was that soul's drama, if you will, their destiny. But in terms of the self, it just requires, I remember, I've told this story before, but, the dodgeball story, playing dodgeball league in school. And I'm not a fan of dodgeball. I find it rather violent. But we had this league in elementary school, so we had to play. And every time I had to play, I would just go in and sort of give up on the whole thing from the beginning and just try to get hit so it would be over. Throw myself in front of the ball. But there was a piece of me, and I understood why I was doing that, but I knew that there was an element of fear, that almost like, but there's this little voice saying, you're not even trying. You're kind of taking the easy way out. You're not really, I know that you think you're being nonviolent, but if we're completely honest, you're just afraid to try. So it was more of an ego problem, I think. I remember one day waking up, and as usual, it was like, oh, it's dodgeball day, and I'll just go. I said, no, you're going to commit to trying, because that's part of my dharma. Right? Is you don't just give up on yourself. You're gonna try. You're going to have some self-respect and try. And it was such a strong feeling. I was terrified because it would be so much easier to just throw myself, give up on myself, throw myself. No, you're actually going to try. So I remember getting in there, and it was such a strong feeling. And I can't believe how powerful commitment. It can actually make up for incompetence. It's like
They
lack
almost
of
sound
skills.
almost the same.
But I remember every time it's like, it was terrifying. It's a terrifying game. Every time I thought, oh my gosh, because what happened that day was all my teammates were taken out very early. I was left alone on one side, my worst nightmare, left alone on one side with prisoners behind me. So I'm having balls firing at me from both directions. And there was just this strong feeling of, you've committed to not give up. That was the whole commitment, to not quit on yourself. And that's got nothing to do with dodgeball. That's life. That I have to, we know the Pink Panther story, but I have to give it my best. I'm actually in that scenario right now. I have to give it my best, and not just take the easy way out. And that's part of Dharma. We each have our own religion. We have a very beautiful lesson in Raj Yoga. You can see the picture over there called the tree, the human world tree, that acknowledges that every human being, every soul has their Dharma, their religion. And it's kind of lost its strength within the soul. We're no longer honoring our religion, none of us really. And that's kind of eating away at us. We've lost that commitment to our Dharma. And the thing that would make us happiest, actually, is to reignite our commitment to our Dharma. Some think of it, if Dharma is difficult to relate to, just your core values, really, is what we're talking about. To really live every moment through the lens of your core values. That's our religion, our personal religion. And as children of God, there's a lot of harmony in our personal religion, actually. There's some overlap or shared values. So that would make us happiest if we could go through the day committed. But instead, we have excuses, or we give up, or whatever, because, we've lost strength. So, how to get back to that commitment to our religion, our core values.
That's
And that's love to me. Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful lead to the question that I was thinking about last week. I know that we talked about God last week, and it's interesting. You had used the word Baba last week, which we do in this study, and the intent, it's a sense of a very personal relationship with this being. It's not just some omnipresent concept in the sky. But the question really is, what is Baba's role in terms of keeping a sense of commitment to myself, or does he play a role in that?
It's amazing. There's been an explosion of trying to connect to your ancestors, your roots, where I come from, as if it will somehow give me more of a sense of myself. And if we trace our lineage to the very beginning, all souls actually have a connection to God. And it's very defining of the self. I remember one scene where it was a service role, so there was a client there that we were serving. And as we were discussing with them, it was a mother, her two children, came to stand with her. And one was younger, the one was a teenager, the other one was younger. And I was just really enjoying it because they were both children of this mother, but I could see that they each were unique and they each had a very unique, special relationship. The mother kind of related to them each differently, but they both belonged to her. And there was something very beautiful about that. And it really reminded me of our each unique relationship with God, that we each have this very personal, intimate relationship with this being who knows us extremely well, each of us individually, and how to bring out our true selves, which we call our highest potential, how to bring that out, because that's what our relationship with that being is about, is really our true self as children of God. That's the ultimate, the eternal. The physical relationships are temporary. And this is the whole nature nurture conversation. We're deeply affected by whoever we feel we belong to. But still, deep down inside, that true nature is there that only the relationship with God can draw out because it's not physical at all. So it's a very beautiful, personal, intimate, meaningful relationship that's connected to helping us honor our Dharma.
So, regarding that piece, and can one really actually just, well, I know it's a sensitive topic, can they really actually do this on their own in terms of just trying to get back to themselves again? Stay that committed.
I think they can get very far, but something I've always appreciated about Raj Yoga is it says, yes, you can get very far, but quite frankly, maybe because we lost faith in ourselves a bit, I'm not sure, we really aren't fully aware of how amazing we are, how, we kind of put a ceiling. So when I'm doing it on my own, I will hit that ceiling, a limited concept of my highest potential. Whereas Raj Yoga blasts that ceiling off and says, your highest potential is way beyond anything you could perceive. And that's wonderful, right? So it's stretching me beyond anything I thought was possible for the self. And I think that's great. So, yes, on your own, but it's nice, that ceiling's going to be blown off and very, very different, far higher sense of self is offered through Raj Yoga.
It's interesting. The reason why it seemed like it's a sensitive question because it's certainly not about proselytizing anything at all. And I think that that's what the clarification is.
I remember a story about, it was a fitness instructor. So she has some knowledge. She's lots of experience in Olympic lifting. I think it was some like deadlifts or one of these exercises. She had an aim in her mind, what she thought would be her personal best, what she really thought was, this would be great if I can achieve this. And she was doing it, going along and just shy of it. And then she decided at one point, it's a moment of humility, to actually go to one of the personal trainers who had a wealth of experience in this. And so she had gone quite far on her own. But she said she was blown away when she worked with the personal trainer. He completely blasted what she had said as her personal best. They went way beyond that because she now had access to someone with expertise. We're talking about religion, spirituality, core values. There is an expert on this topic, and that expert is God. So I can get quite far. But if I can connect with the expert, I'm going to get I think I'm going to be shocked by the results. And we have so many good examples in this organization. I'm constantly, absolutely in awe of the stories of any of these souls whose pictures surround us. What they achieved through their relationship with God, I know would not have been possible on their own. Despite them being amazing souls, it's remarkable. So we have a lot of proof in front of us as well.
Maybe that's why commitment has such an overwhelming feeling for souls in that way, because it's a sense of dependency, but it's actually that God's rule is that you become independent when you really are finally healed.
So yes, we want to be careful what we commit to be ensure that we're committing to something that will empower us.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our session. But thank you, Judy. That was very thought-provoking and very, actually, a very powerful topic. So I don't think there were any questions while we were taking our eye out, and then our monitor suddenly turned off on us too. But
it wasn't very committed, was it?
But you did plant some seeds, and perhaps spiritual clarity will be a topic at some point in time. In terms of determination, in terms of staying focused, I think sometimes we can perhaps not be very clear. So how can you commit? So I'll hand it over to you for our little reflection.
With one thought, I come into focus, very aware that I, the thinker, am sitting here now, this moment in time. It feels like a very profound, sacred moment, giving myself 100% of my attention. And I want to, within myself, focus on something quite specific. Some call it the heart. But focusing, becoming quiet, to listen. What is most important to me? What is my heart calling out for? What are my highest ideals, my core values? What do I feel would honor the self, the personal honor and dignity of the self? Even if the answer does not come immediately, just to listen. When it comes to the physical heart, if I want to hear the beating of the physical heart, I have to become very quiet in a physical way. Similarly, to listen to the spiritual heart, this honorable love, I have to become quiet, trust the self and become quiet. No other noises, just listening deeply to the call of honor within the heart. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Well, thank you, Judy. I was asked to pick a virtue for this workshop, and I had no clue what to pick. I didn't want to choose the same thing. Not that it wasn't meaningful, but I wanted a sense of newness. And so I feel it actually emerged very meaningfully during the reflection. So thank you. And thank you for those for joining. I'm going to pass it over to Judy again for upcoming sessions.
So, as always, we have Inner Fitness on the weekend on the Zoom platform, 2:00. Diet of the mind. So we know the importance of diet for the body. More important is diet of the mind. What kind of thoughts am I feeding my mind? So that will be explored in Inner Fitness. And then in Sunday evening, we have drop-in meditation, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And it's really nice. I love the meditation, the quiet times, because it's a great time to check in. And as we say, recommit to the self. Really, that this is important to me, what I'm doing, and to experience the benefits of why I'm doing it in that silence. So it's a great opportunity, rather than thinking of it as meditation alone, that it's a time to recommit. So you're welcome to join us. Please check our website. We are slowly updating it for November, and always feel free to email if there's any questions. Om Shanti.